Hello and welcome to the first video of the software design analysis course. In this video we will be talking about characteristics of good programs. Please do note that when we are talking about good programs, we only mean it with respect to object-oriented paradigm or software related structure. We will not be talking about programming fundamentals or general good programming practices that are not software related. We will be talking about good programming practices that are strictly related to software designs. So our content for this video will be, we will be studying these principles: readability, writability, reusability, maintainability, abstraction, modularity, independent development. So we will be going across each of these topics one by one. Number one, readability. Its purpose is ease of understanding, but what is actually meant by it? When you have written a code or a program and another programmer looks at it, he should be able to understand it by just looking at it. So it should have such a structure through comments and use of other elements that enables it to be easily understood. So how do we achieve it? We achieve it through naming variables, comments, formatting, indexing functions, and using of classes, structured statements such as use of iteration and selection. So now we will be going through each of these one by one. What is meant by naming variables? Basically, each of the variables in your program should be well named. For instance, you all are familiar with the area code, with the area of a circle code, right? The formula is pi r squared. So there can be two ways to write this small piece of code. It can be written as p equals ab squared. So when another programmer looks at this piece of code, he wouldn't be able to understand it at all. So how can we improve this little code? We should use appropriate name for each variable. So it should be written something as area equals pi r squared. So now when a programmer looks at it, he would be able to understand it upon first look that this function is calculating area of a circle. Sorry. Number two, comments. So comments are a great way to enhance readability. You should use them again and again. You might understand your code, but the thing is, when we are working in professional environments, the codes are shared among different people, among different programmers. So even though you might be able to understand your code, but for another programmer it may cause some difficulty. So if your code is using comments, then the other programmer would be able to understand it much easier. Number three, formatting. So many IDEs will format your code by default, and if they are not doing it by default and do not provide the option of manually formatting as well, then that IDE might not be a good choice. That is my personal opinion. If you're using code blocks has a minimum sort of formatting by default, but it does provide the option to reformat the code. All you have to do is select the code, right click at it, and you will see something like reformat the code. This is same for Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code by default has a much better indentation, but if some snippet of your code has missing indentation or formatting, you just have to select that snippet and right click at it, and you will see an option such as reformatting code or formatting, something like that, and it would format your code. Number four, indexing. So what is meant by indexing? It's that basically an array should start from 0, or if you're using, for example, loops, they should start from 0 as well. They should not be like starting from 1. That is what is meant by indexing. Next is functions and classes. This one is pretty much straightforward. So instead of doing everything inside the main class or inside the main functions, you should utilize different classes, make use of different classes, make use of different functions to enhance the readability. Next we have structured statements. What is meant by structured statements? There are two types of structured statements. One is basically using of iteration and the other is selection. So what is meant by iteration? Iteration by definition means to repeat a sequence of instructions a certain number of times. It can be thought of as a loop. For instance, inside a for loop or inside a while loop, the set of statements will be repeated for a certain number of times. That will be our loop condition. And by selection, we mean to use the if and else conditions. So I'm going to show a quick example of this. Statements. For instance, if we have an array in AR2 5, and now we need to initialize the array and as well as print. What would be a bad programming practice? It would be to initialize it element by element instead of using a for loop. The thing is if we can't do it by for loop, then manually doing is our only option. But if it can be done within a loop, then that is what we are going to look for. For instance, our array is pretty simple. It has elements from 0 to 5, 0 to 4, as it's a 5 elements array. So ARR 0 is equal to 0, ARR, and now we are going to print ARR 0, ARR 0. And then we are going to initialize the first index, ARR1 is equal to 1, and we will print it, ARR1, and so forth. So this is pretty bad approach. I mean, you can just tell it by looking at it, right? So we would use a loop. That is what we are meaning by iteration. For int I is equal to 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. ARR I is equal to I, because it can be done with a loop, so we are using a loop. And we would use a loop again to print it. Cout ARR I. But our fifth point said that we should make use of functions or classes. So we shouldn't do it inside a main body. For instance, suppose this is the main body. This isn't a good practice. So what we want to do is we want to make a separate function for initialization and a separate function for printing. So we would do it something like void initialize int ARR, that is taking an array of size 5, right? And inside it we will paste our code. So we are using a function as well, but we are not using formatting. And I'm just using a simple text editor as I haven't saved the file with a C or C++ extension, so I will not be able to use formatting right now, but you get the point. And now we will make another function to print, void print. This will take the array as well, and there we go. And now we will just call them in the main. We will make the array ARR 5, int ARR 5, sorry. Okay, and pass it to the function initialize ARR, okay, and print ARR. There we go. That is what we mean by readability. Selection, on the other hand, is just using if-else statements or the switch statement. It enhances readability as well. So why all these principles? Why do we need them? The basic idea is that when you are working in a professional setting, when you have a team of software and you're assigned a small module, so you want to make it in the way that other programmers are able to understand your code as well. That is basically the purpose of going through all of this. And one last example on the topic readability. For instance, we could use something like count is equal to count plus 1 or count plus plus. So both of these statements do the exactly same thing, but the first one has much more readability because it is, by just looking at it, anyone can understand what it is doing. So there are different programming languages and not everyone might be familiar with the plus plus syntax, but anyone can understand it just by looking at count is equal to count plus 1, that it is incrementing the count variable. For instance, if a programmer is from assembly language and he reads the statement count plus plus, he might be confused as there isn't a count plus plus sort of a thing in assembly language. In assembly language, there is an increment operator and there is an add operator. Add variable name, comma, and the number you want to add to the variable.